Alrighty, folks. So today we're going to look at all the state polling insofar as the 50 states are concerned, seeing where the race is headed as we are about 40 days from the election itself. So right now, you can look at the screen. You'll notice that Kamala Harris, according to the FiveThirtyEight aggregate, which has a liberal bias. In fact, it's owned and funded by ABC News, by the way. But anyhow, let's take it at face value for a second. It has Harris leading Donald Trump as of today, September 26th, by 2.7 percentage points in the popular vote, which is more so than what Hillary had in 2016, but less than what Biden got in 2020. So it's a very gray area as to who would win this election, hence why we're going to look at it. So just for reference, we're going to show you the 2020 election result. As you can see here, this is the official result. It's a pretty close election, all things being considered. And so it's really difficult to see what predictions we can make aside from looking at the poll. So let's check them out right now. We're going to start with Arizona, as this is obviously one of the states that are super important. Arizona, the state that I reside in currently, has a Trump lead of 0.9. Now, this is interesting for a couple of different reasons. As you can see here, it leaves RFK off as of last month. I was at the rally where he announced his support of Donald Trump, right behind the fireworks, 30 feet away. I was watching it in real time. And, as you can see here in the polling back then, he was getting, maybe 5% of the vote as recently as last month. But like I said, he's out of the contention, and actually Trump's numbers went up. Now, the Trump rally in Arizona that had RFK endorse him, in fact, correlated with the jump in Trump's polls. As you can see here, Harris was leading Trump by like one-ish when RFK was still in the race, but he leaves, endorses Donald. Now Trump is actually leading by about 1 percentage point. And so this is held true. So Nevada isn't looking as good as Arizona, despite the fact that it honestly ought to be about the same electorally. I mean, when you think about a desert state with a bunch of Mexicans, you're thinking about both Nevada and Arizona. But in this case, Harris is still winning right now by about 0.6 percentage points as of today. So it's about 2 points to the left of Arizona, which doesn't really make sense. That being said, though, in 2020, you look at the official result, obviously, and you'll notice that Nevada was about 2.4 points for Biden and Arizona was 0.3. So it did vote 2 points more liberal than Arizona. So maybe I am wrong, in which case the polls could be right and Arizona could be red and then Nevada could be blue as of today. So anyhow, yes, Nevada seems to be blue for now. Now, New Hampshire is an interesting state for me to talk about today because obviously that's a state that does not have a lot of RFK polling for whatever reason, and it also just doesn't really have much polling to begin with. The data points are very sporadic to say the least. But as you can see here, Harris is leading Donald Trump by about 7 percentage points, which if you were to concur this with the actual result in 2020 in New Hampshire, you'll notice that actually Biden won that state by about 7.4 percentage points. And so it's in line with that. So the question would be then, well, if Trump is doing better in both Nevada and Arizona, compared to 2020, how the hell is he doing the exact same in New Hampshire when you think he'd be doing better, maybe be losing by only 5 instead of 7? So there's a discontinuity here. And so that kind of shows that there's a lacking in the polling or that there's something else going on that nobody knows about. But for now, Harris seems to be pulling Biden margins in that state. Now, if you look at another state like New Mexico, this one could tell us a lot about the election if possible, because if you look at it, you see that Harris is winning by 8.1. Now, that's bad news for Trump, obviously, but if you compare it relatively to 2020, Biden won that state by 10.8. So Trump is doing about 3% better in New Mexico than in other states. So what that means is that if you had 3 points in New Mexico in 2020, then obviously if you had 3 points all swing states, he wins Georgia, he wins Arizona, he wins Nevada, he wins Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. So all of a sudden, 3 points in a state that is deep blue like New Mexico, all of a sudden actually makes a big difference. So this is why governing all the polls in all the 50 states is super important. Now moving on to Iowa, what about a traditionally Republican state? Obviously Trump is winning that one. Now, the most important state in this election cycle, the tipping point state, typically would be considered Pennsylvania. As you can see here, Harris is winning in Pennsylvania by 1.2. Politics, in my opinion, hence why I use that in all my videos. But that being said, we're using FiveThirtyEight because of convenience, okay? But as you can see here, taking it at face value, Trump seems to be losing to Kamala by 1.1 percentage points in this election cycle. As you can see here, Kennedy had a more muted presence in places like Arizona, so all over the place. But right now, it's predominantly still Harris, and so you can compare this to Biden's 1.2 victory in Pennsylvania. She's doing a little bit worse than Biden in that respect. Michigan is a state that Biden won purportedly by 2.8 percentage points, and right now Kamala is leading by 2.6, so about the same. Again, Kennedy not performing too strong in the state. Now, what is performing pretty well is the state is allowing and disallowing people to be on the ballot, and it just so happens to benefit the Democrats every decision that the lady makes. But Dan and Nessel aside, Right now, you can see that obviously Michigan is a swing state, but it seems like Harris is winning it according to the most recent polling out of 538, which again is an ABC conglomerate. And so, anyway, this is in line with 2020, so you can believe it if you want. But anyway, moving on to Wisconsin, I think this one is actually going to be closer. Yes, it is. 2.1 points to the advantage of Kamala. So this is about 0.5, half a percentage point. In layman's terms, closer to being Republican than not. In fact, when you look at the RFK performance, small one, RFK being a major factor, obviously would be closer to percentage points, above 5 or 3 percentage points here from Wisconsin prior to out. So in that bump, that endorsement they gave Trump is the process compared to the Southwest. As you can see here, obviously Harris is outperforming Biden in 2020. Biden won Wisconsin by 0.6. So there's a 1.5% difference. It's interesting because it's a little bit okay. So for example, you know Nevada, or Nevada, sorry, Mexico being closer, you would expect Nevada a little further, Wisconsin further, is going closer, Michigan closer. So it's difficult to say what the trend is. Now, what is somewhat profoundly interesting is that Donald Trump is winning Ohio by about 9.5 percentage points. Now, he won it by about 8 percentage points in both elections, 2016 and 20. And we can look at it right now. 8-point victory for Donald Trump in the last election cycle. If he's doing a point and a half better, that's actually pretty nice because it's historically a swing state, but more than that, it's a Rust Belt state. And so, I mean, if you add 1.5 in 2020 from the Ohio to other states, he flips Wisconsin, he flips Pennsylvania, and I mean, you would assume he would also add vote shares in Georgia, Arizona. So he'd probably win off of that difference. So while you might think, oh, why are you going through Ohio if he's going to win it pretty solidly? Honestly, it's because obviously if he's doing a point better in Ohio, that's going to translate pretty clearly to the states surrounding it. And so that's a great sign of life for the Trump campaign right now. If you would like me to talk about Virginia, here we are. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe if you haven't yet, as we're trying to grow the channel like crazy, baby. But listen, 6.9 percentage points of a victory in Virginia are actually now down to 6.7 as of right now. Kamala's advantage in Virginia is actually quite depressing for Democrats. Now, a lot of Republicans, when Biden was still in the race post-debate debacle, clearly wanted him out because he was basically tying against Trump in Virginia. Now, the reason why this is so crazy, despite obviously Virginia being a Republican state as of 20 years ago, is because for the past decade, it's been very liberal. In 2020, you'll notice that Trump lost Virginia by about 10% to Joe Biden. And so for Kamala to only be winning by less than 7 is pretty indicative of what the race is looking like. The race is looking like, okay, this is my logic, okay? So if Kamala wins Georgia by less than 7, or sorry, Virginia, then that means that Trump's doing 3.5 points better generally, which means that if you add 3.5 to Georgia, which is close by Virginia, or Pennsylvania, which is close, or otherwise other states, then Trump is likely to win. And so that's why Virginia is so important. Also, on election night, the vote counting is going to happen east to west. So obviously, Maine is 3 hours ahead of where California is. And so you only have to judge the eastern seaboard the first hour of the election night. And so if Virginia's looking like it's going to be closer than it was in 2020, that bodes extremely well for the other states to the west. And so that's why it's so important that Virginia gets somewhat followed in the polls. Hence why I covered it today. New York state proper. That being said, the most recent polling from Siena College has Harris beating Trump by 12 or 13 percentage points, depending on what candidates you include. Now, this is actually a really good look because if you look at 2020, Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by 23 percentage points in the state of New York. And so that's actually really incredible. If Trump does 10 points better than Biden, 10% of an electorate that's that large is actually tremendous. So this might actually help Trump in the popular vote by a ton. Again, it makes absolutely zero difference as to who wins the election, but optics wise, obviously, if Trump does half a point better in the popular vote just off of New York alone, that would totally help him just presentation wise and mandate wise going forward into 2025. Now, if you look at the other polls, they kind of tell you a similar story. When Biden's still in the race, there was polling by On-Point Politics. I'm pretty sure this was prior to Kamala dropping out or right around that time. Biden was only winning by 11. Okay, so that's according to On-Point Politics, SoCal, and Radical Politics. So again, Biden plus 11. That's a really depressing result if you're a Democrat. I mean, that's like if you're cutting the margin in Alabama by half for a Republican. It's like if Kamala were to lose Alabama by only 12. just as an example. Now, moving on to another state, let's do North Carolina as the final state. North Carolina is pretty interesting because obviously it's a state that is one of the 7 top battlegrounds, but I also think that it's actually not very sure that Trump's going to win, despite the fact that the 538 aggregate only has Trump winning by 0.6 percentage points, which is a little concerning because I think Trump will win North Carolina by like 4. Now, it can come crazy, but come November 5th, I'm going to be looking really good, unless obviously they take a week to count the votes, which in that case, I'll hedge it. I'll say by November 12th, I'm going to be bragging so hard. I'll become a smoker, I'll myself a cigar. Anyway, you look at it, right? 0.6 percentage is with the way it's been looking for months against Harris. Okay, so this is interesting. North Carolina seems to be pretty inelastic. Now, news recently in North Carolina show really good voting trends, but also they've removed 750,000 voters off the rolls, which is actually pretty good because that typically helps Republicans. As obviously, the less dead people are registered to vote, that's probably going to take away some of the pool for Democrats to do their thing with. And so that's great news for Republicans, I guess. But yeah, so Trump is projected to win North Carolina. And so those are pretty much all the states that are relevant. I looked at all the 7 battleground states for you guys in chat, but also I looked at all the several deep blue states and some red states just to kind of get a pulse as to what the movement is in general. Okay. Now, when we look at just this election cycle, what 538 place polling shows as compared to what the end result was, and it's up, but still, it would show that Trump is, oh my, did I forget Georgia? There's no way. There's no way, chat. Okay, come on. Oh my God, no way. I was about to gaslight you guys like, oh, I totally did everything. Okay, whoops. All right, so here's the part right here. So Georgia right now is a Trump plus 1.2, which again is contrasted to North Carolina because obviously he did 1.6 points better in North Carolina than he did in Georgia in 2016. So that's very confusing. New Hampshire stays blue, Minnesota stays blue, but basically he's flipping 2 of the states and he's making North Carolina redder, I guess. So that's about 16 plus 11, 27 total electoral votes closer to victory for Donald Trump. What that would basically mean is that Trump would end up losing the popular vote, I think, by